Welcome back to Africa This Week. In this segment, we talk efforts to boost NSE activities in the market, AMCON's strategic sale of banks, as well as Delta State's bond usage profile. The Nigerian Stock Exchange is stepping up its efforts to boost activities in the market, including a planned bill that would encourage firms on the oil, gas and communication sectors to list. Uche Okoronko caught up with the DG of the Stock Exchange to get an update on some of these issues.
We've been working with our broker-dealer community and indeed the wealth management community for some time to develop a market-making program that we believe would drive liquidity in the marketplace. We've written rules around the market-making program, and those rules are pending approval at the Securities and Exchange Commission. We've also received applications from 17 broker-dealer firms. We intend to select 10 of those 17. We're currently doing due diligence, going over their financials, doing site visits to make sure they have the requisite technology and human capacity and capital requirements to make deep and liquid markets. And then the final thing I'm doing is that we're also conducting education for our broker-dealer community and for other stakeholders that are going to interact in this market-making program.
Now, the NSE is geared towards introducing a lot of value-added services. In 2012, a major part of making one of the top African exchanges is the introduction of new technology. Now, you recently launched a broker network. Tell us a little bit more about this.
What we've done is we've actually rolled it out, and our broker-dealer community are already signing up. We've provided a virtual private network that allows our broker-dealer community to access the market directly at a cheaper price, 7 times faster than what they currently have, and that gives them the kind of robust interaction they need to have with the exchange. And it's also significantly cheaper.
Now, part of your efforts to increase the market capitalization in the Nigerian Stock Exchange is to list more companies. Now, in a bid to list more companies, you've reduced the minimum requirements for companies to list. Now, the concern is that there is a possibility that this may expose investors to the risk from companies who are not so sound.
What we did was to benchmark ourselves against the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and other global exchanges. And we came up with quantitative listing standards that are supposed to make us an attractive listing destination. So the standards we've put out actually comply and are competitive with these different exchanges. For example, we previously required 5 years financials. We're reducing that to 3 because that seems to be more of the standard.
As investors rush to buy the 3 nationalized banks put up for sale by the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, analysts have begun to speculate about the transparency of the corporation, raising questions about its ability to take debtors on.
The tale of a global financial crisis, a collapsing financial sector, and a regulator's bailout. The Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria was created by the government to stabilize the country's ailing banking sector by taking on over 1.5 trillion naira of their non-performing loans. 1 year, a reported 600 billion naira recovered, and a stable banking sector later, the nagging question is whether debtors have been brought to book.
AMCON hasn't really released that much detail for one to look at. As obviously there are rumors and there are stories about what's going on, but until one, we see the actual banks, the audited accounts for 2011 and see what they've taken off their books, we won't know. And 2, until AMCON releases its annual report and its audited accounts for 2011, we're not really going to know for sure. In terms of the debtors, looking at the AMCON Act, it's very hard for them to get around AMCON recovering that debt if AMCON wants to. But it's all about whether AMCON wants to, the will to do, they have the tools. You have a situation where loans were taken, in many cases deliberately taken with no intention of paying back. And what you've seen is that a lot of these loans crowded out actually genuine people who needed loans. If you look at the credit creation Nigeria had during the time, the banks were announcing this incredibly massive credit creation, but what of it is going to certain people? And if you look at the people in the SME sector and the grain sector who actually need these loans, they weren't getting them. So I think, one, you have to be able to punish people who've done things that are illegal. That's one, to stop the moral hazard problem, both on the banking side as well as on the debtor side.
However, AMCON CEO Mustafa Chike Obi says he is just getting round to dealing with these debtors. The streets of the financial capital, Lagos, are testament to this, with properties around the city being seized by the corporation.
The total portfolio of AMCON is roughly 4 trillion, of which about 1.6, 1.7 is non-performing loans. AMCON was actually formed at started operation November 8th, 2010, excuse me. So it's just over a year and 3 months. And we acquired these non-performing loans in 3 stages. The last stage was in October. So it's not fair to say we've had a long time to look at those loans. I will tell you that AMCON was really focused on sanitizing the banking system, recapitalizing the banks in 2011. And that this is the year going forward that we're going to start looking at dealing with the issues of the non-performing loans. Because yes, they're an issue, but like I told you, it just represents about 1/3 of all the assets we acquired. And we had to make sure that the banking system was healthy again. Going forward, we intend to have discussions with every single debtor, understand each debtor's unique situation. If it's a situation that can be salvaged, we want to salvage and help. But you're going to have cases where the debtors are not able to pay, or businesses are no longer viable, in which case we must recover what we can through the sale and acquisition of the collateral of the debtor.
Zenon Oil, owned by billionaire Femi Otedola, is one of the largest debtors. The Nigerian oil giant owes more than 100 billion naira to 8 local banks.
To be honest, it's not very clear, because obviously the banks have stated that, previously the banks have stated that it's confidential. With the thing with Zenon, there have been a lot of court cases. There was once the banks put, a group of banks put a judgment in the papers, asking for a maneuver order and seizing all the assets. And now apparently AMCON have bought the debt of the banks. So I think in terms of Zenon, I think we have to wait for AMCON's annual report and how they've handled that debt. I think Zenon was a systematic risk to a lot of the banks because they owed a lot of money to a wide circle of banks. And I think it was part of the issue was really the banks didn't really do their jobs properly. AMCON is looking at a lot of these companies, and some of these companies are very big companies and they employ a lot of people. And so the idea is, what are you going to close down these companies, loss of jobs, especially now they want to try and increase job employment across the country, or are you going to give them some breathing room, give them an opportunity to try and recover the debt and try and basically grow the company out of the debt? I think AMCON is choosing the latter.
Cases like this have led to whispers that AMCON may have taken on too much, and questions have been asked whether the company is going too easy on its debtors.
We have not actually started enforcement proceedings against debtors. We are preferring to have them come in here, have discussions with us, and see whether or not it's a business that can be supported. So far, everybody we've talked to has come to an agreement with us that we feel comfortable with, that they can pay. Much of these issues are issues of short tenor loans, where the business requires a long tenor loan, high interest rates that the businesses cannot support, and in some cases, the construction loans, and in the construction period, the debtor is not able to service the loan, and so they run into a problem. What we're trying to do is we're trying to talk to them and see what the problem is and try and work it out. So far, we have worked out, in other words, we have reperformed over 600 billion worth of loans. And what that means is that they've paid us a significant amount of good faith payments. They've restructured the loans, and the loans are now performing and now in good standing. That's our initial approach. Down the road, of course, we will get to people who cannot or will not pay, at which point we will commence enforcement actions. And when we seize collateral, we will seize collateral with the same attitude of managing the collateral for the highest possible value.
Stakeholders are hoping to get more answers come March 31st, when AMCON presents its books to the Finance Ministry and the Central Bank of Nigeria. Uche Okoronko, CNBC Africa, Lagos, Nigeria.
Still in Nigeria, Wale Famurewa discussed how the Delta State in Nigeria is using its bond proceeds with Kenneth Opara, Commissioner for Economic Development for the Delta State.
I think what Delta State is looking at is Delta beyond oil. In
Right.
fact, that's our new team in Delta State. We believe that we should leverage the resources we are getting right now from oil to diversify our economy into other aspects like infrastructure and looking at industrialization of Delta State. You know, and we have a lot of things we're doing in terms of we're using a model of special economic zones.
Right.
So one of the models to actualize this, this is a model that China used about a decade ago. They were 90% dependent on oil, just as we, Delta State, are now. But today, it's 22% that oil contribute to the GDP of China as a result of usage of the special economic zones. And these, we have the free trade zones, the Cocoa Free Trade Zone, Warri Industrial Business Park, and the Asaba ICT.
Right.
You know, so these are the three core zones that we are using as a model to diversify our economy. And as we're creating infrastructure, you know, within the state, in order to leverage on these parks.
Well, clearly, you're obviously a very relevant part of the regional economy. Delta is hosting the South-South Investor Forum in April next. Obviously, that will be next month.
Yeah.
Give us a sense of the stories, particularly when it comes to tourism. I see that there is an investment in, for instance, a very ambitious amusement park in the state.
Yeah, the way the South-South Economic Summit is coming is such that we want to use it as a forum to attract investors to the whole of the South-South, but in particular focusing on Delta State. You know, the 6 states of the South-South are coming to Delta State, but we are expecting as the host to drive our investment agenda and industrialization agenda through that forum. And one of the things you mentioned is like we have an economic advisory team in the state that is made up of people from the private sector and also the public sector. They are also helping to drive this South-South Summit to make it a global event and makes it to be successful.